In the attachment section, you have types of attachment, the strange situation named on the specification. This is a compulsory study that you need to know in detail. You could be asked up to 16-mark essay on this. You can also be asked specifically about the 3 types of attachment that are identified in this study. The strange situation was developed by Mary Ainsworth. She was a student of Bowlby's. Whereas Bowlby just focused on the universality of attachment, Ainsworth went further and looked at individual differences in the quality of attachment. So Bowlby looked at whether there was attachment or not. Ainsworth developed further, looking at individual differences, so the quality of attachment. In order to do this, Mary Ainsworth developed a research framework to measure attachment behavior in infants, looking at their comfort-seeking behavior and their exploration behavior, both based on Bowlby's principle of attachment providing a secure base for the child. Ainsworth developed her framework some years before the most kind of famous and consolidated study, but the one we're going to look at is the biggest and widely known study, where she used 106 middle-class infants and their mothers, aged approximately 12 to 18 months in the USA. It was a controlled, overt, non-participant observation. The setting was a laboratory, and there was a playroom with lots of toys in order for the child to have the opportunity to play and to explore. And the observation was behind a one-way mirror, and therefore the observers were not in the room with the baby and the mother. Participants were filmed, data was collected. There was more than one observer, meaning that inter-rater reliability could be tested with ease, and the data was recorded, so test-retest reliability could be assessed as well. Research was every 15 seconds, and you might know from research method that that is time sampling, but also there was a behavior checklist that is event sampling, meaning that the 2 techniques are not mutually exclusive. There was also a score system from 1 to 7 to see the intensity of each behavior, meaning that the data was ordinal. It was objectively as possible numerical to allow clear inter-rater reliability assessment. The behavior categories included exploration behavior, separation anxiety, stranger anxiety, and reunion behavior. We will see that reunion behavior is the most critical to establish the type of attachment a baby displays. There were 8 standardized episodes, all clearly timed, as you can see here from the breakdown, and every baby-mother pair went through the same stages, unless there was extreme levels of distress in the baby when the parent was not there, in which case they might have cut down that stage because the desired result was already obtained. As you can see, initially it's just a kind of getting to know the environment, being brought to the room, and then the second stage is a baseline set. So looking at normal behavior of the baby with the mother is not interacting with the baby any longer, and that's to see whether the baby explores freely when it's just him and her in the room. After that, the other behavioral categories are assessed. Stranger anxiety, for example, to see when the stranger enters, how the baby will show a clear preference for the mother compared to the stranger. Then the mother leaves, and that shows us how the baby will react in terms of separation anxiety. The stranger attempts to console the baby, usually unsuccessfully, and then after 3 minutes or less, as I said, if there's any kind of extreme sign of distress, the parent returns and the stranger leaves, and that's where we can observe reunion behavior. After that, the mother also leaves and the infant is left with no one, and that's not to distress the infant, but to see whether, if only the stranger returns, the stranger is like better than nothing, and the baby is kind of comforted by the stranger. So as you can see, stage 7, the stranger returns to see whether there's any reunion behavior and if the baby is comforted by someone who's not the mother. And then finally, the parent returns. So it's the second opportunity to assess reunion behavior. and then the baby leaves. And you've got in the next slide a little breakdown of the different stages and what kind of behavior is mainly assessed in those stages. Now, what they found was 3 types of attachment: secure, insecure avoidant, and insecure resistant. You need to be able to describe these types of attachment, how they behave differently, and you also might be asked to compare them, hence the table. If you were to be asked to compare 2 types of attachment, you would do so by using the criteria here on the left. So you might say, comparing secure and avoidant attachment in terms of stranger anxiety, the secure child is avoidant of the stranger when they're alone, but when the mother is present, they'll be friendly, and that means that the mother is a secure base. Whereas the avoidant child will not show stranger anxiety and will treat the stranger and the parent almost as if they were equal. The idea here is that a securely attached child sees the parent as a secure base. They will show separation anxiety, and the most important, as I said, reunion behavior. They'll be positive and happy when the mother returns, and they will be comforted almost instantly. Whereas the insecure avoidant don't show any sign of distress throughout the situation, and the main thing that you can observe in these children is indifference. Now, in Ainsworth's interpretation of the findings, this is not actual indifference, but it's that the insecure avoidant baby has learned that protesting or crying hasn't led to anything. They just have to be self-reliant, so they don't show any response to anything because they've already kind of given up on it. The most anxious is the last type of attachment, the insecure resistant, and these children have very ambivalent feelings towards the parent. They're the most anxious, the most worrisome, and therefore they have the lowest willingness to explore. They have stranger anxiety, and it's very extreme, and they also show intense distress. And that again indicates that they don't feel that the parent is a secure base, because they're really stressed as if they don't know if the parent will return or not. So they show that they can't really rely consistently on the parent. And that's why when the parent returns, the child approaches them, so shows reunion behavior, but then might resist contact, maybe push her away. So the behavior is what we would call ambivalent. It's a mix, and we can assume that the parent is inconsistent in their care of the child, and that's why the child doesn't have the confidence to respond consistently to her either. The findings were that the majority of children were securely attached. There was a higher level of avoidant children compared to insecure, and insecure resistant were the most rare type of attachment. The conclusion is known as the maternal sensitivity hypothesis. That is, that a child will show a higher quality of attachment if the parent is extremely responsive to their needs, and therefore the child will develop a feeling of trust. The secure child feels very responded to, the avoidant child feels ignored, and the resistant child has an inconsistent response, and therefore they don't feel confident in the quality of the response they'll receive. This ties to Bowlby's internal working model, because the idea is that the child develops an internal working based on how they are parented. If it's positive and love, they'll be secure. If it's rejected, they'll be avoidant. And if it's confused, they'll be resistant. Now, moving on to evaluation. The inter-rater reliability, as I mentioned before, is extremely, extremely high. We've got a 94% agreement in classifying attachment type, and this suggests that the behavior categories are objectively observable and consistent. In terms of replicability, so the ability to repeat the study, as I outlined, it's extremely standardized. All the episodes are structured, the timing, the setting, everything is can be repeated exactly as it was in the original study, and as a result it's contributed to a very large body of knowledge, and it allows comparison between different countries, different cultures, different groups of people, because it is considered the gold standard of assessing early attachment patterns. However, in terms of ecological validity, obviously there are many issues. The strange situation only looked at mother-child relationships, so we don't know to what extent it can generalize to children whose primary bond is maybe with a grandparent or maybe with the father. We can't be confident that the same pattern will be observed. Also, it's only a snapshot of the relationship in an artificial environment, meaning that it might not tell us the true story of how the parent and the baby interact in real life. Culture bias is a massive issue, and you'll come back to it when you look at cross-cultural variations in attachment. The study is based on middle-class American families, Western norms, and we can see that there is evidence to suggest that the patterns are not the same cross-culturally. For example, in Japan, there are extremely high, compared to the original study, rates of resistant attachment type, but this is not because in Japan parents are inconsistent, but it's just because the standards that are used to assess the Japanese culture are not those standards that belong to that culture. So it's a misunderstanding. That's why we would call it a culture bias, or you'll see we call it an imposed ethic. Going into another country and another culture and imposing on them your own cultural beliefs and standards. We see the opposite in Germany, high rates of avoidant, and for the same reason in Germany there might be a bigger fostering of independence that might be misunderstood or misinterpreted as insecure, but in Germany it would be seen as very secure. So the word insecure is culturally biased. We'll see also in Van Inzendorn and Cronenberg, that is another compulsory study, that there are significant cross-cultural variations in attachment, and that is because the tool to assess attachment is culturally biased. A strength of the strange situation and the assessment of attachment type is that it also has a high predictive validity. So attachment types don't exist only in early infancy, but actually permeate throughout a person's life. So if you're secure as a baby, you'll be secure as a child, you'll have better friendships, and then as an adult you'll have better romantic relationships as well as friendship relationships, and you will also be a better parent. This is there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest this, and this is aligned with Bowlby's continuity hypothesis. So we can see that Pryor and Glaser carried out a longitudinal study demonstrating a clear link between early attachment experience and later social functioning, where unsurprisingly secure people are less emotionally dependent, higher achievers, better relationships, and also have children who feel loved. Avoidant are more aggressive, more detached and unloved, and maybe emotionally unavailable, and the insecure are more anxious. But as you can notice here, our last evaluation point will be about this. This last type of attachment was not identified originally by Mary Ainsworth. In 1986, just about under 10 years later, Mary Main and Julie Solomon, when they were using the strange situation as a tool to assess children's behaviors, they found that there was a fourth type of attachment that wasn't identified originally by Mary Ainsworth, that was called disorganized, because it didn't show clear patterns of avoidance or resistance, but they showed a kind of mixed bag of responses. This is obviously an issue with the internal validity, because if you say, is the strange situation measuring what it intends to measure, in this case quality of attachment, for some babies the answer is no, because they are this fourth category of disorganized attachment type.